Katy Tur nails an American reality twice in one segment. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it completely on the other side.
New data from the U.S. Department of Labor shows that the coronavirus pandemic is still battering the labor market. Last week, another 881,000 people filed new unemployment claims. 29 million people, or 1 out of every 5 American adults, were receiving some form of unemployment assistance as of mid-August. The unemployment rate sits right now at 8.4%. Employers added 1.4 million jobs last month, down from 1.7 in July, and the fewest since hiring resumed back in May. Permanent job losses are also of great concern, with 3.4 million people reporting their jobs are gone for good. Today, President Trump said this about the economy despite its biggest shock in at least 73 years in the second quarter.
We are in the midst of the fastest economic recovery in U.S. history.
As the coronavirus pandemic continues, many out-of-work Americans are grappling with hunger. The New York Times Magazine reports, quote, in the pandemic economy, nearly 1 in 8 households does not have enough to eat. Food banks around the country are struggling to keep up with the demand. On Thursday in Los Angeles, 1,800 people turned to a food bank in Athens Park. There's a certain percentage of the population that thinks, hey, yeah, the economy is getting back. I have gotten my job back. Things are starting to pick up. But there are still millions of Americans that have nowhere to go, and their lifelines have just run out between the unemployment benefits that were cut off, the lack of another bill from Congress to supplement income for those who have lost their jobs. You can walk out the street in New York City and see the lines. I'm sure you can do that in most towns across this country and see the people in your neighborhood who are currently struggling right now.
There are still 11 million fewer Americans with jobs now than there were in March. And it does increasingly seem that many of those job losses will be permanent. This didn't need to be. In Germany, the unemployment rate has risen 1% since then. In the U.S., it is almost doubled. And of course, these losses are disproportionately borne on those who are least able to have the resources to support them, particularly households with children, for example. One study from Brookings suggested that just over 1/3 of households with children under 18 are struggling to feed those children. Another study indicated that there's a 3-fold increase in depression because of unemployment that is related to COVID. And you mentioned my book, Tightrope. That is about how unemployment rippled through a community with a strong social fabric and kind of destroyed it, and left 1/4 of the kids on my old school bus dead from drugs, alcohol, and suicide. I fear that we are now seeing very rapidly unfold what had happened in slow motion in previous years.
You say it didn't need to be this way. You cited what happened in Germany. Why are we set up this way? Why is our society set up to allow millions of Americans to go hungry and to struggle and to fall through the cracks? It doesn't benefit the entire society. It doesn't benefit anybody if you have millions of people who can't get by.
There's a callousness, frankly, that has taken root in the last 50 years in this country. There has been the rise of this narrative about how it's all about personal responsibility and people can lift themselves up by the bootstraps. And when that phrase, lifting oneself up by the bootstraps, originated in the early 1800s, it was a mocking expression. It was a joking expression about doing something impossible. And now all of a sudden it's an instruction for what people are supposed to do to help themselves and their families at a time when jobs are unavailable.
Our system is set up on inequality. Its foundation is inequality. You write this in the New York Times. You wrote it in July, actually. So perhaps today's national pain, fear, and loss can also be a source of hope. We may be desperate, our failures so manifest, our grief so raw, that the United States can once more, as during the Great Depression, embrace long-needed changes that would have been impossible in cheerier times. I know a lot of people who were hoping that this would be the moment where we figured out a way to keep an even bottom for everybody in this country. It doesn't seem like, by the looks of what's happening in Congress, that anything is happening, that there's going to be any systemic change.
I think too often in this country, we blame the broader problems we faced over the last 50 years on industrialization, on globalization, on technology. And look, Canada and Germany went through these forces. They do not lose one person every 7 minutes from a drug overdose. They didn't see the social fabric disintegrate in the way it did in this country. We're the only country that doesn't have universal health care, that doesn't have universal paid sick leave. I think that in a pandemic, in a time of infectious disease, those shortcomings are a little obvious than they normally are. And I hope this will, like the election of 1932, lead to a mandate for far-reaching change, so we will be a little bit more like Canada and Europe.
It's made it even more glaring. Just think of all the Americans who had private health insurance, who no longer have private health insurance because they've lost their jobs.
As they explain what Americans are going through, Katy Tur came to the realizations of two very important issues in America. Right now, we are still based on two very important principles that nobody really articulates, that nobody talks a whole lot about, but it is fundamental within capitalism. It is suffering and the fear of suffering. That's number one. And number two, a distinct dependence on inequality. I mean, if you really understand that that is what our economic system is based on, in other words, suffering, why? You so fear suffering that you will take whatever is given to you. You won't fight for absolutely what is yours. And inequality, it depends on the gradation of people, the different salaried people, so that you have an expectation of growth in as much as it's more than likely fleeting, except for a distinct percentage of the population, except for a few. And we're constantly driving for something we will never have. And we've always and continue always to be played. It is hard for people to believe. It is hard for us to really instruct people that this is fundamental to the existence of this economic system. It is hard for them to really see that it could be this callous. When you see the person in the three-piece suit, or in these days, the regular suit, when you see the people doing their work, when you see the offices pristine, when you have the belief that you can strive to be anything, not realizing that you have to be chosen to strive. When we get that message out, then we can really create that egalitarian society, that society where we really have equal access to success. But Katy Tur hit two nails with that hammer: suffering and inequality. I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.